Hi, I'm the Warrior Witch, and you can call me Nike. Okay, today we'll be talking about finding your witch type. So if you've started your witch journey primarily online, you may have stumbled across this concept of witch types, and it may be little drawings or text posts that explain if you're this type of witch, you probably have these traits, or here are the types of witches and the things that they concentrate on. It might be things like crystal witches, divination witches, sea witches, fire witches. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on. So some of you may be wondering after seeing all these lists, well, how do I find out what kind of witch I am? And I'm here to tell you, your witch type is witch. Or root worker, or practitioner. There are other titles that come along with ways to describe your practice overall, but things like crystal witch aren't really things that exist in witchcraft. Not really. Before you click away or go into the comment section to yell at me about how I'm disrespecting your practice, let me explain myself. Number one, there's nothing wrong with labeling yourself as a type. If you want to do that, if that's what resonates with you most, go right ahead. But these are my thoughts on the witch types that you'll see online a lot. The witch types that you see are usually describing tools. So, for example, the crystal witch. Their primary tool is crystals, but that isn't their entire practice. The big thing about witch labels, candle witch, crystal witch, water witch, sea witch, all of them are describing tools that you use, and every kind of witch uses all of these tools, at least to some extent, or at least many of them. Maybe you don't work with crystals. Some don't really resonate with using crystals. But if you do candles, you will use color magic, you might use sigils, you probably use herbs, oils, all sorts of different tools are going to be used in that practice. So if you were calling yourself a candle witch, you might feel limited and say, well, I'm just a candle witch, so I'm only going to work with candles, and I'm not going to do herbs or crystals, because I'm not an herb witch, I'm not a crystal witch. And that's going to really limit you in the ways that you will practice. Now, I'm not saying you can't resonate with certain tools more than others. I certainly do. I love candles, I love herbs, I love using those in my practice. I don't really use crystals as much, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to call myself a candle witch. My witch type, for me, again, is just witch. That's what I am. That's my witch type, is just witch. Now, if there's a certain tool that maybe you resonate more with, maybe you like candles, explore things related to fire. If you like crystals, maybe explore earth elements and expand out to herbal things. The entire point of practicing is that it's not about what you use, but it's about how you use it. This goes back to a point I made in a different video about witches using what they had historically. Witches didn't always have access to crystals, they didn't always have access to candles, they used what they had, and so maybe their practices were a little bit more niche depending on what was available to them, but if they had the tools available to them, they were not going to turn them down just because they're not a crystal witch, because that concept really didn't exist. And it's a really, really modern thing. I mean, maybe within the last couple of years, modern. Now, I will say, there is also a difference between tools and traditions. If you are a Norse witch, if you have Norse paganism in your heritage, like I do, being Danish, if you use runes primarily, or you connect with those gods, then sure, look into those practices, do some research on that. Same thing goes with if you were raised in the hoodoo or voodoo tradition. That's very different from saying you are this witch type. Practices have long, storied histories that definitely could use some looking into. They're really interesting, and if you want to explore that as part of your heritage or as part of your practice, as long as they are open practices, then go for it. Your practice also does not have to be defined by a certain tradition or a certain heritage. Eclectic witches, for example, that's one of the labels I think gets misused a lot, because eclectic witches are not just, I use a bunch of different tools like crystals and candles and whatever. It's, I take concepts from a bunch of different traditions. They are eclectic in the traditions and the things that they use from those practices. Again, as long as they are open practices. The other part of this whole concept is, once you become more of an intermediate or advanced practitioner, The list of your witch types would be as long as your arm. I mean, it would be everything under the sun. I would be a crystal witch, a candle witch, a hearth witch, a kitchen witch, a sigil witch, an art witch. I mean, it would just never end as you learn more and as you incorporate more into your practice. Everything works together. All of the tools work together. You're supposed to use them, and they don't need to be isolated from each other. I started my practice using divination tools and studying astrology, and I expanded it out to candles and poppets and sigils because I'm an artist, and oils and herbs, and on and on and on. I mean, you can see how that list would grow really quickly. So I guess my point is that don't limit yourself under some label just because you see it online on Tumblr or Instagram, or you hear your friends using those terms. Explore every single part of the craft. Learn about every single tool that's out there that you can use. Learn how to incorporate it into your practice if you want to incorporate it into your practice. Don't limit yourself. The whole point of this journey is to learn. So keep learning. All right, that's it for me this week. I'll see you guys around, and blessed be. I know it was kind of a short one this time, so sorry.